Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on the morning of Wednesday, July 31st. The trade deadline has come and gone. The Toronto Blue Jays made 8 trades, 8 players out, 14 players in. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how are we feeling about all the transactions?
We're feeling very good about almost all of the transactions. We'll get into maybe the specifics of that. But I mean, a great deadline by the Blue Jays. A lot of really exciting moves. Obviously, a lot of stuff has kind of gone down, and it's a whole different ball club, really, now that the dust has settled.
Yeah, I think you can frame the deadline as it's exciting to see trades and restock the farm system at the same time as being disappointed that it's come to this. And for the Blue Jays to go out, and I think they did do a very good job of restocking the farm system, getting some pieces that are like top 30, some top 10 prospects for expiring deals, only trading 2 guys under control, I think is a real win for them at this deadline. And we'll see, like, I mean, how these pieces develop. Obviously, of the 13 prospect types that they acquired, you know, how many of them will play at the majors? Like 5 or 6 in a generous world. Like it's not going to be all of them, but overall, I do think pretty solid returns for all 8 of the players that they dealt away.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some particular highlights for sure. I think of obviously the Yusei Kikuchi return. By the way, good soldier. Sad to see him go, and even his kind of post game or post trade avail was a really kind of emotional availability as well. But goodness gracious, what can you say about that return that hasn't already been said? Jake Bloss headlining it, and also getting Joey Loperfido. Like, this is an unbelievable return on him. And even you look at the Jimmy Garcia return and Jonathan Clase, who himself also looks like a really good athlete, just bringing in a lot of talent, a lot of guys that are close to the major leagues, which is something that we had heard the Jays were hoping to do, were preparing to do, and then going out and being able to execute that in what was seemingly a seller's market, although we might have to redefine that terminology at some point, because this is maybe just what it costs to be a buyer in the 3 wildcard era. But overall, quite pleased with how the deadline shook out for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I think today Brian Cashman called it the most favorable seller's market of all time or something along those lines. And I mean, it's hard to argue with the way that things went down. I can't imagine what the returns or what the teams were asking for, like Garrett Crochet or Luis Robert Jr. or Chris Bassett or, you know, anybody with any semblance of control. I think it would have just been bonkers what we would have seen. I think you look at what the Padres gave up for a pair of relievers for Tanner Scott and Jason Adam. They traded away like their whole top 10.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up 2 really good pitchers in what was it, Snelling and Lesko, right?
Yeah.
Like, this was a legitimately expensive deadline to go out and get really talented players. And even though the Blue Jays would have liked to have probably been part of the buying group, it's still encouraging, or whatever you want to say, that they were able to cash in.
Yes. So let's go through each deal. Let's start it back from the beginning, and we'll run through every deal and kind of give some quick thoughts on the player they dealt and the players that they received. So of course, the first deal comes down, God, I guess what would have that been when Jimmy Garcia got traded? Thursday or Friday?
Yeah, Friday, like afternoon.
Yeah, he gets dealt to Seattle for Jonathan Clase and Jacob Sharp. When you see some of the other relievers that went, like, I mean, it feels like maybe they were dealing him a little bit early. But I mean, you know, Jonathan Clase, immediate top 10 prospect in the system, is a guy that will almost certainly be up with the major league team this year, and a guy with a bunch of tools that can realistically, you know, give a different look to the Blue Jays from what we've seen from some of their you know, approaches and different players coming up in the past. So I think a pretty overall nice return for Jimmy. It just looks not as nice based on what kind of went down in the past couple days.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think that's anything to disparage Clase and what he can bring.
No.
Because to me, like, he sounds like extremely toolsy. He's got some power threat. He's got some speed threat. Like, he could play. It sounds like all 3 outfield positions, I would say, Like this is a
I
guy
mean,
that,
he could probably play right field while starting in left field. That's
yeah,
how
like
fast he
he's,
is.
yeah, like this is a guy that's toolsed up like to the gourd. This is a guy that's going to be potentially like a 2020 guy if it all clicks. Now, the word is that basically he's got to improve his swing decisions, and he's a bit of a free swinger out there. But like, listen, the Jays right now are lacking dynamic talent in a lot of respects. They've got a lot of guys with those bat to ball skills. They've traded away a couple of them. I mean, I think of another guy, another infielder that we'll get to in short order that they dealt away. But this is a team that doesn't have much in the way of explosive talent per se. And I think in terms of like athletics, in terms of athletes, like this is as good as you're maybe going to get in terms of guys that are nearing the major league roster.
Yeah, I think when you look at the team, even if you look at the way that baseball's trending, right? Like it's getting younger, it's getting more athletic, and Class A is a perfect example of that. Like I don't think he's going to be an all-star or like a 5-win player or anything like that, but he's a really nice piece that at bare minimum is probably like a fourth outfielder type, right? Like
Yeah.
if you can unlock the power a little bit more and just kind of looking at like some of his peripherals here, I mean, his swing rate in AAA is like 43.8%. So he's not swinging all that often. So for a guy who, I guess has a little bit more raw power than he's shown in games, like, I mean, you get him swinging a little bit more and you can maybe tap into that. But obviously he's a guy that you just want to get on base and have him wreak havoc when he gets out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the speed, I think actually is kind of an underratedly exciting part of what he could be bringing, right? Like he's not, it doesn't sound like he necessarily, like you mentioned the speed is legit, but it doesn't sound like he's necessarily call it like a burner, like a 60 steal, something insane like that, just based on the fact that he's not going to get on base at quite that prolific of a rate to be stealing, 40, 50, whatever bags. But the
I
fact of
mean,
the
he
matter is
he
that like,
had what was it like
well, he stole
79
70,
in
yeah, but
yeah.
and it's also
I
in
mean, yeah, it's in high A, yeah.
yeah, it's a little different, right? But I mean, like it sounds like this is a guy with really like electric speed, and that's something the Jays just don't really have. I feel like it's something that they're lacking.
Yeah.
And I think of say a team like the Red Sox and how they've really utilized speed this year and basically use it to vault themselves up the standings. And not to say that you're trying to emulate the third best team in the AL East, but it's something that you're lacking that he definitely brings to the fold.
Yeah, he'll be interesting to watch. I mean, it's a fun profile for sure, and something that they don't have. As far as the other player coming back, Jacob Sharp, he was a 17th round pick in 2023. Obviously, the Blue Jays have been prioritizing adding some catching, and it sounded like they had some catching talks at the top of the market with some of their guys, but obviously didn't decide to go in that direction. Jacob Sharp ends up in Vancouver for his debut last night, hits a home run. Very nice way to introduce yourself to your new organization. For him overall, I mean, obviously he's not an instant top 30 prospect in the system. He's 22, came out of UNLV. He was hitting 255, 339, 435 in single A before coming to the Blue Jays organization. So just a nice little throw-in piece there. I'm not 100% sure what the defense is going to look like for him, but it seems like when you're getting a top 10 prospect for your system, just kind of like a catcher who can maybe give you some org depth is a nice add.
Yeah, and they don't have a ton of that org depth as it is at the catcher position, right? I mean, we've just seen that they've basically seen it all pretty much evaporate. This is nothing more than stat line scouting, but 5'7", 180. This is maybe like a Alejandro Kirk. Maybe that's a little bit egregious, but this is not your traditional catcher.
Hey, I mean, he doesn't strike out and he walks a decent amount. So who knows? Who knows what he can be? Can he be an Alejandro Kirk type? Like, I guess that's an option. He's obviously got the low center of gravity that would help him behind the plate, like Alejandro Kirk does. So
So definitely a possibility. No,
yeah,
happy to add him to the farm system too, but more of a lottery ticket than a guy like Clase.
yes, agree there. Let's move on to the next trade, and I would classify this as the most surprising trade to me because it wasn't a name that we had even discussed as like a potential trade option, and that is of course Nate Pearson, who is now a Chicago Cub, ejected in his first outing
Incredible
as a Cub.
meltdown. Incredible.
Um, the home run that Jeimer Candelario hit off of him was like mammo. That was a nuke. But yeah, like I mean, I guess we didn't talk about Jimmy really, but we can kind of have that conversation here with Nate. I think Nate Pearson, like it's crazy to think of the fall off and where this ends up with him being traded for Josh Rivera and Yohendrick Pinango. Um, elite name, elite name
Yeah,
return
80 grade.
deadline for the
They
Blue
got a
Jays.
couple 80
They
grade
got some
names
good
here.
ones. But you know, it's obviously not what you wanted Nate Pearson's career to end up as, and um, it's you know, I think you're more of the Nate Pearson believer between the two of us. So I'll let you talk about it and kind of what you think as far as it goes with Nate Pearson leaving.
Yeah. There are two wolves inside of you. One of them says Nate Pearson throws 100 miles an hour and is a dog, and the other one says this guy has an ERA over 5 as a Toronto Blue Jay and just did not work. Here's where I'm basically at. The Cubs fixed Julian Merriweather, and Julian Merriweather had a lot of similar attributes to Nate Pearson, and it's an easy comparison to draw because obviously both were Blue Jays. There's other stuff, they both throw 100, but beyond that, in terms of makeup and stuff, they're pretty different. But the Cubs have had success turning 100-mile-an-hour guys from the Blue Jays into legit relievers in a sample size of one. The other thing, though, is that, as I kind of said, Nate Pearson was not a good pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays the vast majority of the time. There were spurts where he looked good. I mean, I remember last year talking about him being a surprise Circle of Trust member, and now he's a guy that on a legitimate contending team is probably the guy that comes out in the 5th inning and gets tweets like, "Can you believe that baseball today has guys throwing slop in the 5th inning, throwing 100 miles an hour?" Like, that's where he is kind of at. So heartbroken to see him go in terms of just, I mean, listen, he was like the 9th best prospect in baseball by MLB Pipeline. This was a guy that was far and away the Blue Jays' best prospect for an extended stretch. I still remember his debut in Houston. This guy had all kinds of hype, and it just didn't work out. And I mean, just another case of there's no such thing as a pitching prospect.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a chance to talk about the Ricky Tiedemann news either. Very unfortunate for this all to come down in the same period of time because, of course, everybody's going to draw the easy comparison from Ricky Tiedemann to Nate Pearson. Um, very unfortunate for him to have to go for full Tommy John, and that really hurts for 2025 with Manoah already being out, and of course now is Ricky Tiedemann even the Blue Jays' top prospect anymore? Like, I mean, I think that's clearly up for debate, but you know, he's competing with a guy currently on the suspended list and one of their new acquisitions as the top prospect. So
it's not a great farm. It's not. I mean, this deadline helped, but it certainly is still a little dire.
yeah, yeah. Let's get into the return here because Josh Rivera and Yohendrick Pinango, interesting return. I mean, obviously Pinango is the headliner of the deal. He comes in as the Blue Jays' new 27th prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, a 22-year-old outfielder who was signed as an international free agent in 2028. And I mean, he should be an interesting, like, I mean, he's kind of the same like bat to ball type player for that the Blue Jays. It seems like they actually targeted that a lot at this deadline, which I thought was fairly interesting, but I mean, not all that surprising based on the way that we've seen this organization operate. Yeah, he'd been at high A for like 3 or 4 years before getting promoted this year for the first time. And of course, you know, he's struggling at double A right now. So I'm curious to see, like, is he a guy that takes a long time to adjust at every level? And how long will that take him to potentially, you know, move his way up to the major leagues if at every single new level that he gets to, he struggles?
Yeah, this is maybe a guy that I'm not as high on as some of the other new acquisitions have very little to kind of say about him just based on the fact that, I mean, you look at the AA numbers and they don't really look like anything more than kind of org depth. It's obviously a tremendous success at the high A level with the South Bend squad there. But I mean, again, just a quick BB ref lookup page, and it's kind of like, is he good? I don't know. I mean, with the Smokies, he kind of struggled. To me, this is again kind of another lottery ticket type, but I just don't know how much more you were going to get for Nate Pearson.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a reliever with a 5 ERA with a couple years of control. So a prospect who walks a little bit, has a little bit of speed, maybe has a little bit more power than he showed. Like, I mean, I guess that's a fine return. And then you also add in Josh Rivera, who does not enter the Blue Jays top 30, but he's a guy who's performed a little bit better, or I guess maybe not this season. I know he's struggled as well at Double A. But a guy who's 23, was a third round pick just last year. So for him to be up in Double A already, I think it is interesting. He went to Florida, so I'm assuming kind of from some of the stuff I've read that he's going to be maybe a glove first type, and we'll kind of see how he develops as well.
Yeah, in Double A already, but also worth acknowledging, was drafted as a senior, I believe, right? So he's a little bit on the older side, just generally speaking. Uh, Probably, I don't have his draft slot in front of me, but I would imagine he probably was one of those kind of underslot picks, coming right out of the draft. I'm sure that's something that's right top of mind. But yeah, this is another guy, kind of a glove first middle infielder type. Maybe you turn him into something, maybe you don't. Again, this is kind of a situation where I feel like the Jays maybe see something they like enough in him, and maybe you're just taking a bit of a swing.
Yeah, I mean, is this your like Leo Jimenez replacement in the minor leagues as like a glove first shortstop that maybe has a little bit more power that you hope to tap into eventually? I think that's
Yeah. Well,
that's a fairly reasonable comparison.
here's what I wonder too is, I mean, Nate Pearson at this point, his value was pretty much at the lowest that it's possibly been. But I mean, he's approaching ARB if he's not ARB already. I'm fairly certain he is ARB. Like, was this guy going to get tendered a contract? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, by the Blue Jays, it's certainly I think he probably would have been tendered a contract. I mean, how much is he going to make in arbitration? Like, I don't think it's more than like 1.5 million or something in that range. So, will be interesting to see what the Cubs do based on them kind of basically being like the NL version of the Blue Jays this year, where they're hoping to bounce back in 2025 with some pieces that you like, but and some high payroll as well. So we'll see. I think that if you're looking at like the Cubs and Blue Jays and kind of comparing the two, the Blue Jays obviously did much better than the Cubs, but very different contractual situations where the Jays had expiring to deal and the Cubs didn't really.
Yeah, exactly. And the Cubs, as a result, made a couple of other moves, right? And they shuffled
Yeah,
the
the
deck. But
Paredes, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, like, we'll see in terms of just the two directions, so to speak. But I mean, from the Jays' perspective, this was very clearly the direction that they had to go based on all the expiring deals. And they've only got one expiring deal left on the books right now, which is encouraging.
Who's that?
That would be Yarbrough, but we'll get it to him.
Oh, Ryan Yarbrough. Yeah, you're right. The recently designated for assignment, Ryan Yarbrough.
Yes, yes.
All right. So the next move comes down shortly after the Nate Pearson move, and you want to do this now?
Okay, I mean, we'll see if it
Okay.
messes up the pot.
So
So fill in the listeners. Fill in the listeners.
if you didn't listen to our trade deadline primer edition that we recorded shortly before the deadline, Jory on the record said that he would drink pickle juice if the Toronto Blue Jays traded Danny Jansen, and Danny Jansen was indeed traded to the Boston Red Sox. So Jory is going to be drinking what looks like half a cup of pickle juice here.
It's gonna be unpleasant. Oh, good lord.
If you're listening on
Oh,
audio format,
you might want
you,
to switch to YouTube.
you
You might
might
want to
want
switch
to
to YouTube.
see if you can switch to YouTube just for this portion of the
Oh,
pod.
brother. I will say, Jano had like a 500 OPS. I was sure nobody wanted him. And they got three prospects. So all I'm saying is Cutter Coffee, Edison Paulino, and Gilberto Batista. One of you three better make the big leagues because this is going to suck. All right. We going? Bottoms up? Wait
Bottoms
for it.
up.
Oh, 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 oh,
Okay.
Oh,
I'll accept that. I think that's
oh,
more than enough of what we needed.
oh, oh,
This is a bird's eye view first.
oh.
Man.
Sorry. Ah, oh, jeez.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
As Jory recovers, I'll get into the trade return here. The Blue Jays, yes, did acquire Cutter Coffee, Edinson Paulino, and Gilberto Batista. Cutter Coffee becomes the Blue Jays' 29th prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, and Paulino becomes number 21. Starting with Cutter Coffee, because he was kind of the first piece that emerged from the trade, and I'm sure there will be some prospect rankings that have him above Paulino. But yeah, Coffee was a second round pick in 2022. So he's been in affiliated ball for 3 years. He was in high A this year, his second turn at the level where he has maybe a little bit of an up arrow. Like he's been performing fairly well. He's got a 118 WRC plus there. The walk rates are really strong. The power has really come on this year. He's hit 14 home runs in 61 games and has 8 stolen bases. So maybe long term kind of a utility infielder type, but it seems like if he is able to show off the power that he's shown this year, there could be a little bit more ceiling for something else there.
I'm sorry. I caught very little of
Hey,
that.
that's all good. You keep recovering. We'll keep banging through this trade because as far as returns go, like I think it was a pretty fair return for Danny Jansen. We were very curious what a catcher market would look like because there really hasn't been a lot of catcher trades. And Jansen obviously being a very unique catcher with a very certain profile. Not sure if there was a better landing spot for him, honestly, than Boston. Like he's probably gonna hit some balls over that green monster or
Well,
right off that
he's
green
he's
monster.
built for Fenway in a lot of respects. I don't know what his
Yeah.
numbers at Fenway are as a Blue Jay. I would imagine that they're pretty strong. But I mean, as far as guys that pull the ball, first of all, it's very funny that he's probably the second. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure that he's right up there. But it's very funny that he's the second, maybe biggest pull guy. Oh Jesus, he's maybe the second biggest pull guy that got dealt at the deadline, given that Paredes obviously gets moved. But moving to Fenway should be very nice for Danny Jansen.
Yeah, better landing spot for him than Paredes, that's for sure.
I'll say.
Moving on to Paulino, who is now the higher rated of the return from this trade. He's performed very well at Double A this year, 113 WRC plus, 349 OBP. The slug has just not been there. He's slugging 391. So obviously hit over power guy. Like he's hit 3 home runs this year, has 10 bags in 69 games, so a little bit of speed there. Kind of another utility infielder type. Like, I mean, I feel like between him and Coffee, you probably would like roll the dice on one of them potentially becoming a bench infielder one day, both of them with a little bit of speed. Coffee, maybe a little bit more power than Polino. And then you kind of just see who ends up as the better defender between the two. I mean, it's going to be interesting. Like, I mean, we've talked about 3 guys here: Paulino, Coffee, and Josh Rivera in the Nate Pearson trade, and you can kind of see like 3 guys with very similar profiles. So, I like personally on for me, I think Coffee is a little bit more attractive to me, but I mean, also that's me just looking in the home run column and being like, ooh, dingers.
Well, I mean that's a fair thing to do. I think the other thing is like you're tossing darts.
Yeah.
This to me is an opportunity to restock a minor league shortstop system. Listen, I mean Bryce Arnold was up in AAA there for a while, right? Like this is a team that lacks options up the middle in terms of just bodies. So to add a couple of these guys, even if they're not necessarily major league contributors, it still is something that they had to do.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Paulino here more specific, like a little bit more in depth. Like, I mean, some of the scouting reports say arm might be a little weak for shortstop, and if your arm's a little weak for shortstop, your arm's probably also a little weak for third base. So if that long term is second base, like does he have the hit tool to really, or the power to kind of stick at second base, especially when there's already a number of second basemen in the Blue Jay system? Like, I mean, we'll find out. I'm curious actually because he has played a few innings in the outfield, so I wonder if that's like a transition that they could make with him.
Yeah, it's just utility, right? This is a front office that has valued utility in basically every transaction they've made. So just for any player really to be able to move around, and there's a couple of guys here that present that utility realistically. I mean, I think of a couple of guys they got from the Astros, and we'll talk about that in terms of how they can maybe move around, right? Like I think that's kind of the biggest thing is the ability to provide different looks for this team.
Yep. And the final piece of the trade, Gilberto Batista, currently pitching in the Complex League, a 19-year-old who is striking out 24% of the hitters he's faced and walking 13.7%. So the K minus BB stuff is
A little
not
tough.
great, but I mean he hasn't given up a home run this year. He has a 3.92 ERA. Obviously, FIP likes him a little bit more because he hasn't given up a home run this year. Through 20 innings, like I mean, he's made 5 starts. Like seems like a decent enough prospect to like take a shot on. I wonder if of the 3 players in this trade, he's the one that ends up kind of being the piece that maybe is the long-term
Well,
major leaguer.
I just feel like just based on the variance of call it pitching prospects and the variance of young guys, just kind of by the nature of the beast, right? That there is the most different outcomes for a guy like a Gilberto Batista, excuse me. So I don't particularly mind it. And listen, like if you're going to toss lottery tickets, listen, they didn't get anything in the way of pitching really. I think it was 11 of the 13 prospects they acquired were position guys. So he's a bit of a unicorn in terms of this deadline goes. So we'll see if he turns into anything.
Yeah, he was the Red Sox minor league Latin program pitcher of the year in 2023. So he had a really strong year in the Dominican Summer League where walks are very common, very Dominican. The Dominican Summer Leagues, there's a lot of walks. And for him there, he only walked 5% of the hitters that he faced. So he's shown the ability to throw strikes in the past. And I wonder if that's something that the Blue Jays can kind of get him to do on US soil here.
Yeah, I can maybe coax that out of him. Listen, if he
Yeah.
shows any kind of feel for his stuff, right? Like that's kind of where you go from there. But we'll see what he brings. Still really young, just a guy that's a ways off in the major leagues, but the most compelling, I'd say, like you said, of those pieces.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving on here because there are plenty trades to get to. Let's go as on, I guess it would have been Monday. The Blue Jays trade Justin Turner to the Seattle Mariners. Second trade with the Mariners of the deadline for RJ Schreck.
Yeah, I mean, you see Addison
Oh,
Barger
sorry.
running out.
Before
Oh, go ahead. Go
we
ahead.
move on to that, sorry. I guess Danny Jansen, one of the I guess the longest tenured Blue Jay at the time of the trade. Um, fan favorite, like can't express enough of like how enjoyable it was to watch him at his best and how much that it seems like he was an integral part to the clubhouse, the team, and just like how to see him develop into the player that he's become has been a really cool story.
Yeah, for sure. Word from Sportsnet Shai Davidi that the mood around the clubhouse was very somber following the Jano trade. People calling him kind of the quarterback of the team. Like this was a heartbeat guy. They kept saying it during broadcasts and on the radio. This is a guy that grew up with the team, joined them, I think, as an 18-year-old, and now as a family. Like this is a guy that is a Blue Jay, and it doesn't sound like he's probably going to be making his way back, just based on the fact that they had already tried to find some common ground. We'd heard earlier, maybe in the winter, and there was no bridging that. So you wish him all the best, and this is a guy that'll definitely be missed.
Thoughts on him ending up in Boston, other than it's a nice fit for him?
No, definitely a nice fit. It sucks to see him in a Red Sox jersey. I mean, there's no two ways about it, right? But you hope he has some success.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Justin Turner trade. They get RJ Schreck in return. RJ Schreck was a outfielder, 9th round pick in 2023. Spent 4 years at Duke and then went to Vanderbilt for 1 year before being drafted. So another one of these kind of senior types that they get. I mean, obviously you weren't going to get a ton for Justin Turner, but his recent stretch of play obviously helps with getting something back for him. I think there could have been a world where he was in the Trevor Richards, Kevin Kiermaier last hour dump trade, kind of trying to do him a favor, get him on a contender type of deals. But obviously Seattle wanted him. And I think he's actually really nice fit for that lineup that strikes out a ton, where he can kind of go there and be like the 6, 7 hole guy who puts the ball in play a lot. So
Sure. Well,
nice fit
he was the
there.
cleanup guy the other day, right? So this is a lineup. I mean, it tells you how Seattle's hitting is, right? They're a little bit Jays adjacent in that.
Yeah, I mean missing Julio and Crawford right now due to injuries, but yeah, it could be a good fit. We'll see.
Well, here's what I'll say about Shrek beyond obviously the obvious what are you doing in my swamp jokes. He hit really well in high A and looked the part of maybe not a major leaguer, but definitely of a prospect, and has since been called up to Double A and has struggled in an extremely small sample size of 8 games. Again, this is nothing more than stat line scouting, but I can tell you that this is a guy that, while a little bit older for the level, those are some encouraging numbers that he put up in high A. And I mean, the promotion was evidently earned. So to me, this is just another case of a guy that you're looking at in the high minors. Maybe call him a diet Jonathan Clase. And ideally, he's able to make some kind of impact for your team in relatively short order. I mean, just turned 24 just a couple of weeks ago. And again, another left handed hitter. They added a ton of that at the deadline. Just again, a different look for this team potentially brings something a little bit different than what they currently have to offer, specifically at the high minors.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I've spent a little bit more time this year watching the Canadians like than some of the other minor league teams, just the way that it's worked out. And so obviously you remember him playing a few games at Everett against Vancouver. And I mean, the thing that's kind of, I mean, obviously he's got the great approach, which you know shocking that the Blue Jays are trading for guys who have control of the strike zone. But yeah, like I mean, 12 homers in 78 games is really nice for him and kind of his first full professional season. Of course, he's 23 coming off a year in the SEC, so you would really hope that he has succeeded at high A. Like I mean, that's obviously all you can ask for from guys coming from a league that is probably comparable to high A, if not a little bit better than high A. So we'll see. I assume he starts in New Hampshire. And but we'll kind of keep an eye on his approach there and how things continue. Obviously, the power grades are a little bit lower than the hit tool, and obviously that comes from the approach. Um, yeah, he's a pretty nice return. Like I mean, he's a Blue Jay, a top 30 prospect in the Blue Jay system, which if you had told me that they would have gotten for Justin Turner, I probably would have been a little surprised.
Well, that's the thing, right? Isn't it? It's worth acknowledging. Justin Turner obviously had that really, really exceptional April and really struggled in May. But at the end of the day, I think he had it was something like a 113 WRC plus since June 1st. Like he kind of turned it around to an extent with the Blue Jays. And I mean, it ultimately helped out. And I mean, Ross Atkins had glowing reviews of him as a man. Said he was an integral part of this team. And you think about Turner's post trade avail and saying that he let down a whole country, right? Like this seems like a really good dude, a good veteran, and will mesh pretty seamlessly with wherever he winds up. And that happens to be the Pacific Northwest with the Seattle Mariners. So we'll see exactly how he does fit into that lineup. He picked up a base knock in his first AB with them. Like this is a guy that hopefully is able to lead Seattle to potentially an AL West crown, still in the hunt there, and maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, what do we call him when they acquired him? Just professional hitter, right? Like, I mean, you can
Exactly.
insert him into any lineup, and he's gonna hit. And he did that for the Blue Jays, and obviously that the May was not great, but I mean, obviously, great dude. Obviously, somebody that is a great locker room presence, and yeah, it was cool to see him wear a Blue Jays jersey after however many years he spent in LA, uh, being an all-star type player. So
100%. 100%.
it might be one of those where you see like the Justin Turner in a Blue Jays City Connect jersey, like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, he'll be firmly in the list of remember that dude one day for sure.
Yeah, he'll be right up on that level of excellence with today's coming starter, Paulo Espino.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Senior or Junior Senior Vladimir Guerrero Senior in a Blue Jays uniform.
He never played. He only played in AAA, I believe.
Yeah,
So never got into a big league
Frank
game.
Thomas. I mean,
Frank
he
Thomas.
was a
There you
little
go.
bit
There you go.
more. Yeah,
Frank Thomas.
we don't have to get into name some dudes, but let's keep moving on because the next deal that came down was the most significant deal for the Blue Jays, and that is Yusei Kikuchi heading to Houston for what has across baseball been labeled a fleecing, a steal, an insane haul for the Blue Jays in this deal for Yusei Kikuchi, where they get back Jake Bloss, Joey Loperfido, and Will Wagner, the son of noted non-Hall of Famer Billy Wagner. Um, yeah, I remember that, the first report comes out that it's for Jake Bloss, and everybody's like, Jake Bloss, that's a huge return for Yusei. And then it comes out that Loperfido and Wagner are both in the trade, and everybody kind of loses their minds. I mean, what was your reaction to the deal?
So I think for me, I'm almost more excited about Loperfido than Bloss. And
Okay, are
Bloss
you
is
gonna
the better
steal my flow
prospect.
like that?
Listen, Bloss is a really exciting pitcher, probably becomes the Jays' number 2, maybe number 1 prospect with this trade, but by all accounts, Loperfido is legit. This is a dude, defensively really strong. Might even fake it in center field for the Blue Jays. John Schneider alluded to that. This is a guy that for the Blue Jays, they'll have the opportunity to have this guy hit the top of the lineup, hitting big spots. Like this is a legitimate prospect and a guy that people thought would headline potentially a Vlad Guerrero Jr. trade if things went so crazy. And for him to be the second piece in this deal is nuts.
Yeah, I want to start with Loperfido because, like you, I am Loperfido pilled and kind of have been throughout the season. And so seeing his name in the deal was pretty exciting because I think he can be a legit prospect or a legit major leaguer. I mean, he's a guy who has spent time at all three outfield spots. He's posted a positive DRS in the outfield despite only having played like 39 games in the majors. I think he's a +3 out there. So the Blue Jays aren't sacrificing their outfield defense by getting him out there. He's a dude, max exit velo of like 113.9 at AAA, which only like 3 players in the Blue Jays system have reached this year, and that's including Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Aurelvis Martinez. So that kind of tells you what kind of pop he's bringing. I know the major league numbers haven't been all that encouraging through like a relatively small sample size, but I'm writing a piece for a Substack right now, and like my Loperfido section is done. And one of the things that I saw as I was kind of digging into some of the numbers is that his approach has been slowly improving the more at bats that he's seen. And so like that's his chase rate increasing, his walk rate increasing. I know he is a guy who's like walked 10% of the time at every single level that he's been at. And then at the majors this year, it's been like 6%, and the strikeout rate has increased a ton. But I think he's a guy that the more major league at bats that he gets, he's going to turn into a very, very, very good player. Maybe not an all-star level player, but like a significant contributor at the major league level who has power. He has speed. He's in the 91st percentile of sprint speed in baseball. He's a good defender. He's a guy that can play all over. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of swing and miss potentially just based on him, the way that he swings. But I really do think that he has the potential to be like an impact player for the Blue Jays at the major league level. And they just got to give him at bats, get him at bats the rest of the way. He should be in the lineup every single day against righties, against lefties. I know he's only gotten like 14 major league plate appearances against lefties this season and only has 2 hits. But that's something that they got to get him comfortable with because I do think that the raw tools are there for him to become a mainstay in the Blue Jays lineup for the next 5-6 years.
All right, so here's the stupid, way too fast prospect hugger question because we've talked about this before. Will he rank in the top 5 of left-handed Blue Jays hitters of all time?
I knew that we were going to talk about this because we've been all over this where the Blue Jays have had like no good left-handed hitters ever. Brannen Belt I think he was like the 3rd most
productive
Blue Jays left-handed hitter in the past 20 years, outside of Carlos Delgado. And I think he will be. I think there's a chance that he's probably 2nd on that list. I mean, Brannen Belt was very, very good. I think he was like a 130 WRC plus type. So
somewhere in there.
So like that might be a little bit high of expectations for Loperfido, but I think he could be like a 120 WRC plus guy for, for 4, 5, 6 years. So I really do think that he is going to be like the most significant left-handed hitter of this Blue Jays era, which is crazy to say, but they just haven't had anybody. And I really, really, really do like the return for him. And if you had told me that they were going to get him for Yusei alone, I would have been ecstatic about the Blue Jays being able to do that.
Yeah, they did very well. If you want to have some fun on Twitter, look up Bloss Dana, and there is
Loperfido,
lots.
Dana.
Yeah, it's all great stuff for Blue Jays fans. So
Yes.
great return. I mean, what else can you really say? And we haven't even touched on that third asset
Well,
in
I think we can talk about Bloss a little bit more, but one thing with Loperfido, like I mean, player comp potentially Nolan Jones type, power,
yeah,
speed, defense,
for
like
sure.
can't complain. Let's talk about Bloss a little bit because he was a third round pick last year. Funny that they've just loaded up on 2023 draft picks. Rushed to the majors, I think, is a safe assessment of what has happened to him this year, just based on the Astros pitching situation with so many injuries there. I think he's not a major league ready starter at this point, which him having pitched 3 starts in the majors might make you think, but he's got some development left and still needs to pitch in AAA. I don't even like, I mean, obviously he makes 4 starts at high A this year, 2.08 ERA, and that's like, yeah, sure, that's good enough to move him up. And then at double A, he goes 1.61 ERA over 8 starts. I mean, I think I would have liked him to see, I would have preferred him to stay in double A a little bit longer there. Um, but they kind of needed him, so he comes up, makes 1 start in AAA, and then ends up with the Astros making 3 starts. He'll start in AAA with the Blue Jays after going to the player development complex for a little bit, so they can kind of get a little bit of a sense of who he is. But yeah, really really nice return. Obviously, he's going to be one of the Blue Jays' top couple prospects here. Kind of one of these up arrow guys. He's fastball, slider, curve, throws sweeper, and kind of like really really good extension on his fastball and of course all of his pitches. So the velo might not be like a mid 90s guy, but he'll kind of play up to that with the extension.
For sure. I think the name that I heard on the radio the other day, that if you want to talk about like 95th percentile comp, Mitch Keller was a
Mm.
guy that was mentioned that he could potentially call it turn into maybe a best case scenario or among the best case scenarios for him. I would be very happy to add that to the Blue Jays farm system. This is a guy that is a legitimate top 100 prospect in baseball, and you're getting him for 2 months of Yusei Kikuchi plus more. Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, like getting this type of player was exactly what they needed if they want to compete in 2025. He'll be in the 2025 rotation. I have no doubts about that. I mean, he's still 23, which is crazy. I mean, he was drafted out of Georgetown, and like just a really really nice pickup for the Blue Jays. I think you look at the Statcast, like similar pitchers to Jake Bloss based on velocity and movement, and they have 2024 Justin Verlander, 2024 Cutter Crawford, 2024 Jameson Taillon, 2024 Nick Pivetta. Like I mean, those are all pretty significant names who maybe some of them are having different types of seasons, but like, yeah, like, I mean, you're rubbing your hands together. Like that's a guy that you want on your team. And for them to get him plus Loperfido plus Wagner is just an absolutely huge win for
It's
the Blue
huge.
Jays.
It's undeniably huge. Like this is a farm system that needed a shot in the arm, and this is a couple of shots in the arm.
Yeah. Yeah. Really excited to see Bloss. I think his first few starts at AAA will be really intriguing to watch, just kind of see if the Blue Jays do have anything planned for him.
I guess we'll see.
Maybe leave him alone. Just
Try
kidding.
not to
Just
destroy his elbow too.
okay. Will Wagner, another legacy pick. Kind of a older type. He's obviously 26. Just recently turned, or I guess he was traded on his 26th birthday. Has hit it at almost every level though. Like it's been a really nice career for him. I mean, obviously there's kind of a lack of position for him, and he's kind of like another one of these hit over power types, but dude walks a lot, doesn't strike out a ton, and Yeah, it just kind of seems like one of these dudes that will kind of fit into the Spencer Horwitz, Davis Schneider, Ernie Clement mix as a potential utility infielder that can hit and get on base a little bit.
I mean, he's been an above average hitter at basically every level of the minor leagues. Hasn't blown the doors off anything per se. But I mean, I'm just looking at his Fangraphs page now on a 122 WRC plus this year at AAA. Like, this is a guy that's probably major league caliber, a little bit positionless, which is fine. The Jays have plenty of that. But like, if you can add a guy like this to your team, if you can add someone like this to the mix, there's no reason to believe he can't be a bench piece. No reason to believe he can't necessarily be something of a platoon guy, right? Like, this is a guy that you like to have in your farm, a guy that you like to have around. Not necessarily because he's so electric, so elite or anything, but the versatility and the floor seem pretty good with him.
Yeah. Just kind of like you look at the major league projections for him, like what the projection system has. And I mean, Steamer has him as a 105 WRC plus. Zips has him as an 88, which feels maybe a little bit low. I do think, like, I mean, left-handed bat, is there going to be a spot for him long term on the Blue Jays for him being an older prospect? Like, I mean, you already have Spencer Horwitz. Are you going to have Will Wagner and Spencer Horwitz on the same major league roster? Probably not. But I mean, again, it's one of these guys that I would imagine ends up on the MLB roster at some point down the stretch, so they can give him a shot and see if there's something a little bit more there than maybe some of these other guys have shown.
He kind of screams like 27th and 28th man for the roster expansion. Now, obviously,
Hope he's got his
you
passport ready.
well, right? But I don't know in terms of 40 man. I don't know if there's maybe better options to get those spots. But given all the turnover and presumably they've cleared a bunch of 40 man spots, given how their deadline ultimately went, I would figure he's probably in the running to be one of those two guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, obviously it's a piece you like, but it's a piece that you could, like, if you're the Astros, you're not like, if it was Loperfido and Wagner, you're probably like, yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. Or if it was Bloss and Wagner, you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, I think we'll see him eventually, and it'll be nice to kind of watch him play at AAA to kind of get a little bit of a better feel for what he is defensively and what his long-term defensive home may be.
For sure, for sure.
On this trade, Will Wagner ends up as the Blue Jays number 22 prospect according to MLB Pipeline, and Jake Bloss ends up as number 3 behind Ricky Tiedemann and Aurelvis Martinez.
So that wrapped up a very busy day, and then deadline day
Well,
rolls
I
around
did you want to do
yesterday. And
Kikuchi? Like, I
I mean, we
mean,
can talk. Yeah, we can talk.
I think Kikuchi, a very intriguing player because of how his first year went in Toronto, where it kind of, at the time of the contract, I know people were very high on it, and then he pitches ultimately not very great in a Blue Jays uniform. But then just the development for him and kind of turning into the player that he was over the past couple of years, I think is a really, really cool story for him to go from being like a guy that you have to drop from the rotation in a playoff hunt to a guy who you're getting 3 really solid pieces for, with the acquiring team only getting two months of them.
100%. And even like this year, right? He's got a 4.75 ERA. He's been much better than that, though, by every peripheral. I mean, it's no accident this is the return that you ended up getting for him, right? I think for the Blue Jays, this is a guy that was a good soldier. I recall him going down to AAA voluntarily for a little while there. Last year was arguably their best pitcher at times when Gosman was stumbling at times. This is a guy that sounds like he really loved Toronto. Sounds like a reunion could potentially be in store if the dominoes fall in the right way, and is just a supremely likable Blue Jay.
Yeah. He's I mean, and obviously, like, people who are very upset with the trade, I mean, he's 12th in baseball and stuff plus, so I think it kind of shows, like, he's got the stuff to be like a top tier major league starter, which is why the price was probably so high for him.
For sure. It's crazy that he went for more than Jack Flaherty, like dramatically more.
Yeah, I think Detroit probably overplayed their hand on that one. I mean, they still got back like a couple nice pieces, but for Jack Flaherty, who would you be surprised if he doesn't necessarily continue pitching the way that he has.
Yeah, he's maybe a little bit more of a question mark between the two of them.
Yes. Okay, let's keep going here. Moving on to trade deadline day, where the Blue Jays were fairly quiet for the majority of the day, and then kind of started they're taking the best offer for their
Yeah.
remaining pieces. Let's start with the IKF trade because I think that's the most intriguing of the three deals done yesterday. I mean, we already talked about Charles McAdoo a little bit. But he comes in and is now ranked as the Blue Jays number 14 prospect by MLB Pipeline. And he's a different profile hitter than some of the guys that we've talked about.
Completely different. He's sounds like almost like a sellout for power type. Maybe that's a little bit strong of an implication for him. But in terms of everyone they brought in, I'm thinking like him and Loper Fido probably are 1-2 in terms of just raw, just power tool that they're bringing in. It sounds like McAdoo is a corner outfield slugger type potentially, which is not what the Jays have really been adding.
Yeah, I mean, Ross said that they'll give him a chance to stick at third base, which is very intriguing. We'll kind of see how that goes. But I mean, between two levels this year, he has 14 home runs, 17 stolen bases, a walk rate over 10%, a strikeout rate around 22-23%, and then like a really, really nice slash line. So I think looking at him, like, I mean, obviously, we talked about it a little bit before hitting record, but like, I mean, he's an arrow up type prospect where he's kind of flown up rankings this year. And obviously, if you're, a team trading that, it doesn't feel good. But realistically, if guys who are on an upward trajectory sometimes don't always continue on that upward trajectory. So
Yeah, a helium guy, right? But I mean,
yeah,
who knows how much helium he's got left? I think the big question will just be if he can continue to hit. I read something somewhere that a lot of his power maybe is derived from his ballpark. It sounds like the Pirates minor league system, it's a bit of a bandbox down there. So we'll see. I mean, he crushed it with the curve. We'll see if outside of Altoona, if he's still able to have that kind of success. I mean, it remains to be seen.
yeah. Fun piece, I think. Very fitting return for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Obviously, one of the pieces who they traded that wasn't under control for them, and I think that they would have had to be blown away. So obviously, a guy like McAdoo did that for them, and I think he'll be a name to watch kind of over the next couple of years because he is going to be, 23 by opening day next year. And if he's at AAA next year, like I think that's really interesting. And if he's a guy that can play third base and corner outfield spot, I mean, obviously they have a decent number of corner outfielders and corner infielders, but I think that McAdoo could maybe be the best of the bunch if he really does kind of continue hitting the way that he has and can continue that at Double A.
For sure. Well, the other thing too is that this is an organization with a bit of a dearth in terms of third baseman. So perhaps it's no accident that they're willing to let him continue to ride it out.
Yes, and him being a right-handed hitter, different than some of the other guys that they brought in, which very interesting. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, I mean, surprised for you? I again, like, I mean, I know that you send the text in the chat and you're like, I'm kind of upset that they traded him. Like, I mean, how are you feeling about that now?
Yeah. So upset is maybe too strong a word, but I think obviously going into the season, I think the belief was he was on this player friendly deal and the Blue Jays had overplayed their hand on him and he was just kind of a guy and he seemed like a bit of a we'll see what happens. And I recall during our season preview episode, I had a bit of a call it what I think one of my hot takes was 3 WAR IKF, which he is comfortably pacing for. I mean, he's gotten hurt, but per 62, he
He
should
was
blow
he
past
he
that.
was at 2 before he got hurt.
Yeah, so he should blow past that per 62. And he did exactly what was kind of asked of him. He was a 90 WRC plus guy with really, really good defense. I think that's a guy that the Blue Jays could have used if they were competing next year. Are they going to compete next year? That's what they want to do. I don't know if it's what's going to happen. And if it isn't happening, then his value next year will not be this high, one would think. So I'm basically in a position where I think that, to me, he's kind of the exact kind of guy you want as a utility guy on a really competitive team. The Jays are not that right now, so their willingness to listen makes sense. But if they intend to be as good as they hope to be next year, don't be shocked if you're kind of like, hey, IKF, maybe a reunion makes some sense.
Yeah, I think on our deadline preview pod, I was generally took the stance that he will not be as good going forward as he has been, which I think is a reasonable take for the guy who has been in the major leagues for 7 years and has never posted an OPS above 700. For him to all of a sudden come out in a year where offense has generally been down and post a 758 OPS when he has not hit the ball all that well. I mean, his xWOBA is 291 and his WOBA is 331. So I think it's reasonable to expect that there's going to be some regression there. And I think for them to get a dude who comfortably slots into your top 15 prospects is really a real win, even if you do kind of lose that defensive versatility and just how good that he had been for you this year. I just don't see him being this good again. I welcome to be proven wrong by that, but I mean, for a dude who all of a sudden this year is posting, his career ground ball rate is 53.3%. And for him to post a 44.4 throughout so far to this point of the year, with, not great quality of contact numbers, I just think that, there's going to be some regression baked in. And I think I said in that episode that, like, I think that some of the changes that he's made are intentional, like hitting the ball in the air more, but he also doesn't hit the ball all that hard. So I think looking going forward, like, I mean, he's traditionally kind of been like a 90 WRC plus guy. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's like a 100 WRC plus guy.
Yeah, and I think that's realistically fair. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with moving off of that just because he's a guy at the height of his value. Like, it's a thing that makes sense to do.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah. Like,
just,
I mean, like if we look at, let's say 2026, I don't think Charles McAdoo is going to be playing for the Toronto Blue Jays in 2025. I think that would maybe be a little bit quick, but who knows? Maybe he's like a September type addition. But in 20, if I'm looking at 2026 between the two players. Like, I mean, obviously, IKF would not be a Blue Jay in 2026 based on his contract. But, like, I mean, are you getting more value from a 2026 McAdoo or 2025 IKF? Like, I mean, I would feel pretty confident saying that McAdoo will be a better hitter and provide a little bit more offensive value over the course of his Blue Jays career than IKF would have next year.
well, just the team control, by the very nature of the team control, he will.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about trying to compete in the near term, IKF brings more to the table, obviously, than McAdoo does. So it's just really a question of, what is the Jays timeline?
Yeah. Yep, interesting deal. Kind of another one that popped up, and you're kind of maybe not surprised that the move got done, but, like, I mean, it's maybe not one that you were expecting.
For sure.
All right, let's keep moving on. We got two more trades to cover here. Trevor Richards to the Minnesota Twins for Jay Harry. Um, yeah, these last two are the Blue Jays needing to get, or not needing, but just kind of, I guess, taking anything they can get for Kevin Kiermaier and Trevor Richards. Any thoughts on Trevor Richards overall leaving? Like, I mean, he's a dude that's been in Toronto for a few years now and has really filled a ton of different roles.
Yeah, he's worn a lot of hats for the Blue Jays and, good soldier and all of that jazz. But I mean, definitely not a guy that I'm heartbroken to see leave. Uh, had his moments, was really effective at times, filled in as a starter a couple of times. A guy that deserves to have some success and has really been everything you could have asked for him. In terms of return, I mean, we'll see if Jay Harry turns into anything. I think that outcome would maybe be a little bit of a surprise. But on the whole, just a guy that probably you're moving out as a pending free agent looking for anything resembling value in return.
Yeah. Looking at Harry, I mean, sixth round pick in last year's draft, another 2023 draft pick out of Penn State. He hit very well in his pro debut last year. Like, he actually played a lot of games. He got 30 games after being drafted. At single A, he hit 337, 419, 465. So once again, another bat to ball type, good approach. but that's kind of taken a step back so far this year at high A, where he has 8 home runs, which I think is a little surprising. Like, I don't know if they tried to unlock a little bit more power there with the walk rate dropping a little bit and the strikeout rate increasing significantly, or maybe that's just a result of the sample size where he gets, 340 plate appearances versus 120. Yeah, like he's a dart throw, lottery ticket.
Yeah,
Hopefully you
exactly. And
scratch
there's a
the
couple of
three
those, right?
aces.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's a hope. It's a hope and a prayer. Jays identified someone that they liked in the Twins farm system and decided that was going to be who they would target for Trevor Richards, who, is what he is. And hopefully the Blue Jays find another, utility middle infielder.
Yeah. Funny looking at his junior year at Penn State, he had 6 home runs, which was his career high in college, and he is at 8 already this year. I mean, again, more plate appearances, but I'd be
Maybe he's
interested to
unlocked something.
know
Maybe.
maybe he's, hunting power a little bit more, but for a guy who in his college career hit 304 and then in his first year of affiliated ball hit 339 to see that average drop to 214, I do think that there's probably some um power hunting going on there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we'll see maybe if the Blue Jays, because obviously the Blue Jays are more of a bat to
They
ball.
value a little bit of a different tool set than the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, they might be reverting that back to where he was before
And
this
we'll see.
season.
And we'll see.
All right. Final trade, the how do I phrase this? The least interesting trade, I
Yeah,
guess. Like, I mean,
that's a way to put it.
the Blue Jays did not get a prospect back for Kevin Kiermaier, which is completely unshocking considering that they already tried to have somebody take him by putting him on waivers, trading him to the Dodgers for Ryan Yarbrough. Let's start with Kiermaier because I think that that's the more important part of this trade. Um, we kind of gave him his flowers in the one episode where we talked about him announcing his retirement, but like, I mean, yeah, like we said then, like a pretty fun player to watch in a Blue Jays uniform, has made some really good memories in a short time, and hoping he gets a chance to compete for a title with the Dodgers.
Yeah, you would think he does, and I hope he does get it. I mean, listen, I'm not necessarily cheering for the Dodgers, but I'm definitely going to be cheering for Kevin Kiermaier, a really likable dude, a really fun dude, a guy that even though his bat maybe left him, the glove never did. This guy was an athlete out there until the very last moment of his Blue Jays career, and he will fit in very nicely for a Dodgers team that is struggling up the middle in center field.
Is he the only trade that we guessed correctly?
I think so. I think so. You know what? Like, pretty unshocking. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
there
I mean,
wasn't that many options for Kevin Kiermaier. Don't forget these Oda, a healthy chunk of change, right?
yeah.
Part of the Yarbrough return is a cost saving maneuver for the Blue Jays more than anything else.
Well, I think they sent cash, didn't they?
Yeah, so it might even just be an even swap, and might be just a competitive balance maneuver. Like, I don't have an answer for you. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
we'll,
mean,
we'll see if Yarbrough even makes any starts with the Blue Jays. You would think he would, but I mean,
I
might
mean,
even
Paolo
just end up.
Espino is starting today.
Yeah, so it's kind of like he might by default.
Yeah, I think
He might end up in that Justin Turner or hey remember that guy category.
he will be a very remember that guy because he um obviously has pitched against the Blue Jays quite a bit as a member of the Tampa Bay Rays, and obviously we haven't seen him as much in his time with the Dodgers. But he was designated for assignment recently. He's kind of stopped throwing strikes and stopped striking people out. But he has a 3.74 ERA. That's all out of the bullpen. He's already thrown 67 innings this season. Kind of weird the way that things have gone in LA with them needing so many innings from James Paxton and Ryan Yarbrough and those types. But I figure he will come to Toronto and probably get a chance to start and maybe fight for a contract in the offseason because, as you mentioned, he is a pending free agent.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the Blue Jays are going to need some innings down the stretch, and they got a guy who can probably give them some of those.
Yeah, I will leave you with this parting gift. If you haven't seen it already, look up the Boston Red Sox roast of Ryan Yarbrough. I think it was I don't know if it was Andres. I don't remember who it was, but it was the Masson or Nesson or whatever broadcast back in his Tampa Bay Rays days. It's quite a funny watch. But Ryan Yarbrough, a thorn in the Blue Jays side. He is Blue Jay now, and I'm sure he will still be a thorn in the Blue Jays side somehow, some way.
He has a 5% K minus BB percentage.
Yeah, needless to say, this is not a guy that's going to miss a lot of bats.
No. And I just want to pull this up real quick for what the lowest K minus BB is, minimum 60 innings pitched this year. Brian Yarbrough is fourth lowest behind Dakota Hudson, Adrian Hauser, and James Paxton.
Yeah, needless to say, this is not a guy that's going to make much of an impact. He will probably get a couple starts, and we'll see if he even lasts through the end of the season with the Blue Jays.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that Ryan Yarbrough is a Toronto Blue Jay.
Yeah, it's a funny thought. It's like, of all the guys, like, I mean, sure, I guess he's a very sure, I guess, pickup.
Yes, very much so. All right. Before we go, I'm going to get you to put a grade on the Blue Jays deadline now that we've gone through all the deals, considering the 8 guys going out and the 14 guys coming back.
I mean, I can't give him an A plus just based on the fact that this is not a team that was supposed to be in this position. I feel like they just, by the nature of the beast, don't get that, they don't get that grade. But Ross Atkins, he probably didn't save his job with this. I don't think you can save your job with the deadline, but my goodness, has he made the argument to keep him a lot stronger. He identified a lot of talent in other teams' minor league systems. He was able to leverage his expiring deals, and he's turned it into some really, really good prospects for the Blue Jays.
When they were talking about building up a sustainable farm system, he meant when they were able to sell at their first competitive window.
Brother. Oh, brother. I mean, listen, like, are you wrong?
I agree. Like, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, not an A plus because, like, it just feels weird to give them an A plus, but they did very well. And I think like an A minus is very appropriate for what they were able to do. And we'll see how they operate going forward with these guys. And I think it'll be intriguing to watch what they become by the end of the season 100%. And what changes that the Blue Jays make.
We will get a good idea by probably the end of this. Well, yeah, I guess technically the end of next month, what the 2025 Blue Jays will look like. We will get a very good idea because I'm sure a lot of these guys are going to get some run.
Yes, absolutely. And we will be watching. Thank you so much for watching with us here today at the Bird's Eye View Podcast. You can follow us on YouTube. We are there at the Bird's Eye View Pod. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BEB_pod. Thank you so much for listening.